Hey, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. All right, good. So I'm going to be agreeing with the idea that laptops should be allowed in high school classrooms. And my first point is that laptops are more effective for learning and functioning in an academic environment than with other methods. So there was a meta-analysis done by Michigan State University, which reviewed 96 other studies, and it showed that overall, laptop programs where each student was provided with an individual laptop, there was a significantly positive average effect on the academic achievements of students in English, writing, math, and science. So the students were able to perform better in all of these areas because of their individual laptops and what they gained from them. And then also with laptops, students tended to write more in their classes. So they were able to get more of what they were thinking onto the paper, and the teachers were able to analyze this better. Now, also with the laptops, the note-taking is much easier because you don't have to worry about the students while the teachers are giving a lecture don't have to be worried about writing down everything saying, because it's much easier to type something than it is to write it. So the students can kind of keep up with the teacher and appreciate the lecture while also taking their notes. And they can easily reformat their notes using a Google Doc or something like that for whatever way they're going to be studying. And if there's useless information which they recorded, with a click of a button, they can delete it. And then also, while it is shown that writing things down can increase memory, if they have it in a Google Doc, they can easily transfer it to a site like Quizlet, where they can study in a variety of methods, not just writing. They can use audio or other things like that, whichever way they prefer to study and they learn best, they can use that. And then also, not only for students, but also for teachers, the teachers can help the students have more academic achievement, because the teachers, they can use applications. If each student has their own laptop, the teachers can give an assignment and use an application to track to see if the students when they're completing the assignments and how they're completing them. So the teachers can isolate the problems. For example, if a student doesn't have good study habits, the teacher can isolate this problem and talk to the student about it. Or if the student's fundamentally approaching a problem the wrong way, the teacher can show the student where he's or she's making a mistake and show them how to fix that, where they can see on the assignment.
All right. So first, I'm just going to highlight my points and then continue yours later. So American author, diplomat, and former ambassador to the US, Samantha Power, said that in many classes, laptop depicts split screens, notes from a class, and then a range of parallel stimulants. NBA playoff statistics on ESPN, a flight home on Expedia, a new flirtation on Facebook. No one can argue that the advent of technology and the internet has drastically changed the way we learn and educate and deal with the world. However, no one can also argue that spending time in front of the screen, the distractions that technology brings, and an overwhelming information that it brings can be a lot for children to handle. I argue that laptops should not be allowed in classrooms, assuming that the use of laptops, like you said, will reduce the use of writing for note-taking. The main reasons for that is writing has scientifically proven benefits for learning. Access to laptops and the internet proves to be more distracting, which I would support with the case of studies. The medical disadvantages for the eyes and the posture and other medically disproven proven disadvantages, and that children don't need to write college level and college length essays. Hence, the curriculum can be easily taught through textbooks. One of the main problems that parents face with their children is the increased amount of time currently that they're spending in front of the screen, the mobile, laptop, iPad, television, and the numerous other gadgets that we have. So according to BBC, when children are in school, especially when they're old enough to be in high school, they generally spend roughly 6 to 8 hours in front of a screen as compared to 3 hours in 1995. Teenage boys are worse with roughly 8 hours, and this time incorporates the time spent watching TV, playing game consoles, using a mobile computer and tablet outside of the potential use that they could have in schools if they had laptops. It's already difficult to get children off these gadgets, and schools have the authority, the resources, and the academic reasons for allowing children to follow the textbook learning system. Mainly, laptop usage in classrooms will reduce the need for note-taking, but studies show that the very act of using a pen or a pencil to put things on paper can help you better retain the information you were writing, according to research. That's because in the physical act of writing, signals are better sent from your hands to your brain to build motor memory as well. Now, evidence from psychology, cognitive science, and neuroscience suggests that when students multitask on laptops, which you said like they can use like learning programs and they can use various different kind of things while doing schoolwork, their learning is far spottier and shallower than if the one work that they had, which was writing notes, which was done in full attention. They understand and remember less, and they have greater difficulty in transferring their learning to. They have less difficulty transferring their learning to new context because they have better retention. Therefore, when schools say that laptops should not be allowed in high school, students are not only rule bound to not use them in their schools, but will also have those 6 to 8 hours where they will stay away from personal gadgets and therefore make better use of their educational environment. It becomes easier for schools to regulate the educational behavior when they do not have to constantly monitor them and check that this is what they're doing with their laptops. So it helps them to provide better opportunities of focus and learning, which schools should highlight.
Right. So one of the things that you mentioned a lot was the students being distracted and ensuring that they aren't goofing off or things like that. However, once they're in high school, students, it's important to make sure that we're giving them some responsibility to prepare them to go out into college and things like that. And a laptop is a really good way to do this because you want to make sure they're when they're on their laptop, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and things like that, and giving them this responsibility. However, if they're abusing this and say shopping online, these privileges can be taken away, and you can use things like site blockers to disencourage people from doing things like that, for getting distracted. So if you give them that little bit of a responsibility, it will really help them in the future. And then also you mentioned how there's a lot of screen time which is spent. However, even if this isn't necessarily something we want, it's going to be required for the future because computers, as time goes on, will become even more relevant than they are already. For example, a study at Oxford University concluded that 47% of jobs in the United States are at risk of computerization. And so it's important that the workforce of tomorrow knows how to seamlessly and intuitively interact with machines, which they do by spending time on their laptops at school and things like that.
Oh. Yeah, so okay, so now you talk about the fact that firewalls and stuff can be used. Now, I just want to point out that some schools argue that schools should have firewalls and they don't let them browse social media, but realistically, there are many obstacles. First, it's difficult to decide what may be distracting, especially with the MyRate kind of websites. Secondly, schools have more time and resources in adding stricter firewalls and monitoring the use of laptops in classroom. Third, children can have downloaded games, movies, and videos and software that can distract them, and these do not require the internet. Cases of students hacking school databases to change grades, stealing computer passwords, infecting computers with keystroke-logging malware, accessing secure sections of the school sites, posting pornography or hate content on school sites, and hijacking school's website have been documented according to James Colbert and information security analysis for 135,000 students in Jacksonville. And he says the school systems are uniquely vulnerable to hacking. Now, as far as you talk about changing times, the familiarity and advancement of technology already happens through social media and the fact that children are already interested in gadgets, which removes the need for schools to teach them anything to keep up with these changing time. In fact, the study by Jacksonville showed that the students were far more experienced with gadgets than the teachers of the school themselves were. The more important necessity for children in high school is to work their brain, improve their memory, and not focus on other things and like be distracted. Now, one of the main reasons I suggest that laptops should not be there in classrooms is to inculcate the culture of writing, note taking, and developing. One major factor is standardized tests such as the SATs. The SATs are a common test high schoolers take, and it's entirely handwritten. So when you write in classrooms, this not only helps you prepare in terms of writing speed and practice for these exams, it also helps improve retention, memory, and the ability to think cognitively. So one major disadvantage of having laptops in classrooms is also reduced personal interaction and less sociable behavior. According to the International Center for Media and Public Agenda, most children and teens spend 75% of their waking lives with their eyes on the screen, and they feel lonely or they feel bored when they don't have one. So schools offer the environment for kids to interact, and when laptops are introduced, there's a study which shows that children have more incentive to sit and play games or watch videos instead of actively engaging with each other. Now, furthermore, I'd like to highlight the fact that there are medical advantages and medical disadvantages of having laptops in classroom. So according to Dr. Blakely, an optometric advisor for the College of Optometrics, the negative effects of computers can be eye discomfort, headaches, itchy eyes, dry watching eyes, burning sensations, changes in color perception, blurred vision, difficulty focusing. And furthermore, there are chances of laptop-induced dermatosis. And then and according to a new report from the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, heavy use of notebook computer can lead to a number of physical ailments, including headaches, muscle soreness in your neck and back. The posture that kids use for laptops is also what hunches their back. No surprise, the carpal tunnel syndrome. Hence, laptops are built with unified body constructions, and users are left with few ways to work with them, and that would reduce the long-term physical.
So one of the points you mentioned was people hacking into the system and cyberbullying and things like that. However, you could be seen as a good thing that the students are doing this now instead of in the future. Because if they hack into the school system or something like that, they'll be punished and suspended, and they'll be taught what's wrong with their behavior. However, if they're left to do this in the future, then when they're adults and they're treated as adults and respected in that way, they could put things online which they shouldn't be putting online because they were never taught that in school. So that's another way schools should adapt to the 21st century to prepare children for this. And then you also said that students already spend time on social media, so they're already being prepared as we go into the future for students to be on laptops and things like that. However, the students, what they're doing is they're probably on social media, like you're saying, like maybe they're on Instagram or Facebook or things like that. They're not using Microsoft Word or academic websites. So they're not learning how to do research and things like that during their time, which they spend online. They're doing other things which won't really benefit them in this future. So we need to show them how to do that research and how to avoid bad websites and things like that for the future. And then also another thing you mentioned was writing, helping you remember different things. And once you record stuff on your laptop, you can still write it down and make note cards and things like that. However, it's more efficient to just have it on your laptop so that then you can go back and write later, or you can go back and make a Quizlet or things like that. And you did mention also typing and things like that being bad for you. However, this has also been shown, for example, when you're writing, you're often hunched over, moving your pencil in very small movements. So writing is not necessarily good for you either.
So now I'd just like to talk about your points, the points that you mentioned about responsibility. So FBI statistics show that in 2011, there were more than 2 million burglaries in schools, in colleges, which is 25% of property crimes committed, which includes the loss of electronics, such as mobiles and laptops. So when in colleges, children are losing so many things. High school students are even less responsible than college kids, and their parents should not have to worry about it. Now, as far as adapting, your points when you talk about the fact that students should adapt to, they should be exposed to social media and these kind of things which are distracting to them. Currently in high school, they've just come from middle school, and that understanding is not there. Already, parents are not able to control the technology intake of their children. Hence, when schools enforce it and when schools use the authority, you have to understand, the schools have the AV requirements in terms of like learning audio visuals, in terms of like learning video, learning computer software, which should help them in college. Most schools where kids will be able to afford laptops already do have audio visual rooms. They have computers, technology that can be regulated by the teachers and that can be accessed. Now, as far as you talk about like uploading notes on Quizlet, when you assess the medical benefits, when you assess the facts such as mental retention, such as memory, such as increased information, I'll just cite a few studies to actually show the negative effects of laptop. So a psychology professor at California State University did a study in high schools that although children had been told at the outset that they should study something important, including homework, an upcoming examination or project, or reading a book or a course, it wasn't long before their attention drifted. Students' on-time behavior started declining at about 2 minutes, at about the 2-minute mark, and they began responding to arriving texts, checking Facebook feeds. And by the time 15 minutes were up, they had spent only 65% of their time on doing schoolwork. Then Kaiser Family Foundation did a study and published in 2010 where children in the lives of 8 to 18-year-olds conducted a survey, and most of the time they were also watching TV, texting, listening to music, or using other medium when they were doing homework. And the vice president of Kaiser says that I don't care if a kid wants to tweet while she's watching American Idol or have music on while he plays a video game, because that doesn't interfere with schoolwork. Now, a study done by Stanford University, after putting 100 students through a series of 3 tests, found that people who are regularly immersed in several streams of electronic information do not pay attention, control their memory, or switch from one job to another. Especially, this is conducted in a school with firewall, as well as those who prefer to complete one task at a time. A study done by Cornell University in 2003 entitled "The Laptop and Lecture" actually divided a class in half and allowed only one half of those laptops during lecture. The study found the students who were disconnected from technology performed significantly better on post-lecture quiz than students who use laptops. Now, when you talk about your study, the meta study that you talked about, you also have to understand that these studies were done in a controlled environment where the laptop was given specifically to assess their note-taking. These studies, the ones that I mentioned, gave students the option of using it and just observe their behavior.
So you cut out one point in the beginning, but I think I got what you were saying about the students being less responsible and things like that in middle school and high school than they would be in college, and how they will do bad things with the laptops and they won't spend time studying. So, but as I've been mentioning earlier, as laptops become more and more relevant in the future, we want students, we're trying to prepare them to go out and get jobs and go to college and things like that. We want, when they're at that point, for them to know how to use a laptop and not spend their time browsing social media and things like that. So the best time to teach them would be now, by giving them this responsibility and teaching them how to correctly use it, and molding them into someone who can responsibly use a laptop. And then also the laptops, as you, sorry, one second. There we go. So laptops can also be used if a student is far ahead of the rest of his class or her class. They can be used to help that student keep learning instead of being held back by his grade level and having to stay there. The laptop, with minimal disruption to the class, the student can just go on their laptop and learn new curriculum at their own speed. And then also, you mentioned how students can, a lot of schools, if they have the money for laptops, they have the money for other rooms and things that can be used. However, if you're giving a student a laptop, this is something that they'll be able to take home usually and things like that. So they can use this device anywhere. They can take their notes that they've saved from earlier and do the audiovisual practice at home if they want to. They don't have to be in school to do this practice. And you were also talking about how the studies that you showed how the students would actually interact with it. But the study that I was talking about, it documented how these programs, how they actually went into effect. So even the variables that we wouldn't normally consider, this tracked and or didn't necessarily track them, but it looked at the outcome of them, because these were documenting actual laptop programs which happened in schools and showing how the students did actually have higher achievement. And at my own school, in the past couple of years, I've been in 3 different schools where they've had laptops. And in all 3, the teachers have used the laptops for monitoring progress of the students and ensuring that they're learning to the best of their abilities. They've been really using the laptops to make sure the students have been learning the best that they can, and it's had a good effect on the students.
As far as you talk about coping and teaching them, the studies and currently the trend that we see, we are seeing like talks and stuff on the internet actually about like having mental awareness, staying away from the gadgets. So clearly, when parents themselves are not able to control it, when schools have a lot of schools are understaffed, when schools have to put in more extra resources to like spend that much time, that much energy, when textbooks and writing can do the same can solve the same problem. Now, as far as your note taking goes, according to Science Wars, a 2004 study by state journals found that since kids these days are such quick typists, as you said, that it allows them to take more notes, they take down every word spoken by the teacher, cutting out the moment of assessing the content of what's being said and retention or having retention of only the important points. Then a 2012 study in Science Direct attaches further to the power of the screen, suggesting that laptop use doesn't lead to lower test scores for the user of a given laptop, but also for classmates surrounding them, possibly just because being able to watch someone multitask is distracting. According to BBC News, scientist Susan Greenfield says that screen use is bad for brain development. On Washington Post's blog, Jeff Gore says that kids with higher GPAs and standardized test scores were negatively affected by electronic cues than low-achieving kids. He speculates that bright kids might have been more confident about their ability to multitask, whereas that didn't actually turn out to be true. Now, as far as your point goes about inculcating, preparing them for college, my point being exactly the same, that when students are going to go to college and when they are going to when they have to write college level essays, which are, because in college they do need laptops because they have logs, they have to collaborate, they have to write longer essays. That's why when children come out of high school, they have enough practice, they've been taught enough that writing, the benefits of writing, the benefits of note taking, that's why they will minimize their screen time even in college. They will use it only when it's necessary. Right now, just imagine the scenario. I went to high school too. When I had laptops in my school, we would have kids in classes where they would be listening to a lecture, but they would not actually be listening because they would be playing games, they would be chatting with their friends. So when you give someone a stimulant and when you give someone technology and when you let them, when you give them the opportunity of using these, it's difficult to regulate it. Hence, when you don't allow them in classrooms itself, it removes this problem from the root cause. In 2005, a medical term was coined to diagnose some of these problems known as computer vision syndrome. A review of the syndrome in the Survey of Ophthalmology, a peer-reviewed journal, calls it a repetitive strain disorder that appears to be growing rapidly. Now, as far as actually, well, I'll pass back to you right now.
So, as you were saying that you need to devote a lot of extra resources to using laptops, whereas textbooks can have the same effect, I would argue that laptops can have a much greater effect than textbooks can because of the way that once you have this information written down, whereas textbooks just give you the information, laptops you're able to use the information to study, and you can kind of manipulate it in different programs like I talked about earlier, like Quizlet, to study even better. And so also, you said that when students have a laptop and they're at a lecture, they usually write down every note, which can be a problem, but I talked about earlier that it's easy they can look through afterwards and critically assess what of this was relevant and what don't I need as much. Because when you're writing stuff down, if you miss an important point, and by the end, you might not remember all of the parts to it, or as something like that. Whereas if you have your laptop and you have everything there, then you can look through and see what you need and what you don't need and kind of critically assess it at the end and format it the way you want. And also you were talking about multitasking, how students who might want to multitask because they think they'll be able to do it and then it becoming into a huge problem for them. However, as I talked about earlier, it's good for them to encounter this problem now as rather than later, where they would, if in the future, if they're in college and they encounter this problem where they think they're good at multitasking but they're actually not, then that could be a major problem for them. So, and then I would also argue that you were saying that students who don't use laptops as much when they're in college or at work, they'll only use laptops minimally. But I would argue that if they're not exposed to it more and how it can be used in the classroom, they would be more curious about it almost, and they'd want to see it. Like we see this in kids who parents place too many restrictions on. They do things that their parents wouldn't let them just out of curiosity. So I think these kids would be the same way. They'd try taking notes with their classroom, and when they found that it was faster, they'd try to do it more often, and they'd encounter many of the flaws you talked about. Whereas if they learn how to do it in high school and make those mistakes in high school, then they'll already be adept with laptops and know what learning suits them best. So when they're in college and work, they won't make those mistakes again.
So now when you talk about the different platforms that students can use, such as Quizlet, my point being that exactly. So when they write it down, they don't need these other platforms. They don't need to go back to their, they don't need to more or less don't need to go back to their notes and sort out what they need, because that time in classroom, which is significant, is spent already in retaining the most important information and building their memory. Now, when you talk about exposing them to these platforms in high school and then like having that education, first of all, you have to understand that the point of children being addicted to gadgets and the point of like them experimenting in classrooms nullifies it a little bit, because we have currently seen that outside of school anyway, children are spending 6 to 8 hours of their time in front of technology. So they are not, there is no, they are not being weaned off of it. They are not like not being allowed it. It's just that to control them in an environment where there are so many distractions, especially with social media, and social media has so many even detrimental benefits in terms of like depression, in terms of like comparison with your classmates. So I think that when you bring them in a controlled environment, because at that age that is the most, one of the most critical ages for their brain development as well. So because they're already exposed to this outside, you can't, like, it's like comparing this to like drugs. Maybe like drugs is a good example of what you're saying, but just to children from the age of 2 these days have iPads and technology, so they are fully exposed to that. Now, assuming that point can also go to the fact that if children are exposed to these in high school, that can also become a pattern, and they can fall into that pattern more easily, never having known that writing for them works better for them, because writing is something that children inherently don't like. They are more attracted to gadgets, they are more attracted to using technology because it's easier. So when we need to enforce, when schools will enforce and when parents will enforce that habit, it's like forcing your children to eat green vegetables. They won't like it, but like you will force them, and then they will know that it's healthy for them. So when you introduce them, because you're saying, because textbook learning in a lot of places, people are not even using textbooks outside their classroom because they find laptops more distracting, then they find them more fun, and they can do a bunch of other things on laptops. So when you inculcate those habits, you create a generation of people who are first have their foundation set, and their foundation is solid, and then they even have the mental ability and they have the cognitive ability to then decide whether they like laptops, whether they don't like laptops, whether they want to continue writing. Because note taking in itself is also a skill that can be taught in classrooms, and they are, a lot of kids are being taught, and it does help them in college. So that point about exposure can also go the other way, in the fact that when you expose them too much, or when you let them, it's like giving them a free pass. When you let them bring it in, they will continue using it, and they will, because a lot of times it's difficult to monitor. If one teacher is teaching in class, it's difficult to monitor 50 students and see what's going on in their laptops. When children get distracted seeing someone else's laptop. Now the point being, a lot of kids may not even be able to afford laptops, or parents don't want to give them laptops. So that is a personal intrusion, I think, on their choice as well, on the parents.
So one of your biggest points was about social media and and students in general, how they'll be using these laptops outside of school, and that'll be enough for them. They won't need to use it inside of school because they'll be prepared using that. However, as you're talking about, students are using the social media and things like that at an almost unhealthy amount. At like 2 years old, they're already on social media, and it's been shown to cause depression and things like that. But that's why we need to have laptops at schools, so that teachers can teach them how to handle themselves online and how to deal with those problems. And then also, if we give them laptops, we don't have to necessarily eliminate writing. We can still have programs to show them how writing would work and things like that. And if it works better for them, then that's what they could use. However, we should give them the opportunity to use laptops to learn how to function in the 21st century better, with a multitude of things, with social media, cyberbullying, research online, and things like that. And also, you say writing is enough. However, for some people, they might need other stimulation. Like after that, they might be especially good at using audio, for example, to learn. Like when they hear something, that's how they best grasp it. So we want to give them the opportunity to do this, which we can do. We can not only give them writing, but we can also use other things if we give them access to computers.
Your point now about giving children with audio. So my point being that I agree, if someone has a disability or a learning problem, then those people should specifically be given laptops. But the fact that if a child says that I learn better with audio, schools need to enforce, and schools need to teach them, and they need to teach them textual learning, because that is what they're going to encounter in high level college. I'm running out of time, unfortunately.
So you were saying that students need to teach them textual learning, I think. So the sorry. So you were saying, I'm kind of confused on what your point was there. But I think what you were saying was that students kind of the best way for them to learn is to write. Is that kind of what you were saying? All right, yeah. So what I'm saying is that even for students have a variety of ways of learning. There's the traditionally accepted idea of having visual learning, audio learning, I think tactile learning, and writing as learning. So so it might not necessarily just be the students who are especially bad at learning who are the ones that need laptops or could benefit from them immensely. It might be all kinds of students. And also, even if some students don't necessarily need them to learn, as I mentioned earlier, preparing them for this 21st century environment that they'll be going into as adults is extremely important, because that's where they'll be conducting themselves mainly. So much interaction will start to take place online that we want to give them that ability to do that.